So we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to this session today. I know some of you have been through all 3 sessions, so thank you for participating fully. They are building a little bit, but they're not completely relying on each other, so you don't have to have those. All of you should be in the course, so you can get in and follow along and see the content and be able to know what we're talking about and have access to all of that after we leave. Welcome. Have lunch over there. So we will leave this course open for a couple more weeks so that you'll have access to the materials. Following this, there will be a Canvas course catalog option that will be a self-paced that will be available this summer. And you can log in and it'll have some of the same materials, it'll have additional materials and some other things, but some of it will repeat. We are utilizing some of the same things. Want to start today's session with an idea that's called backward design. How many of you are designing fully online classes or will be soon? Right here. Anyone else? Anyone?
Will be soon.
Will be soon. Perfect. Anyone who's already teaching online fully? Okay. Good to know. All right, so in building up and planning to be able to teach a class fully online, you kind of want to look at it through a completely new lens. We want to look at all the pieces that we have, and we want to look at it as if we're teaching the course the first time. So we're going to go through a little bit of that process today with you so that you can kind of get a feel for what that means. When you get a chance, would like for you guys after this session to watch this video. It is about a 10-minute video that's on the page for the backward design. It is a fabulous example explaining what we mean by processing this as backward design. Does anyone have an idea of what we kind of mean by building your class with a backward design? So we want to look at there's a whole phenomenon that's built around this, but the main goals are we want to look at really what we want students to be able to get out of the class. A lot of times we go, oh, we have this content, right? And we want them to know this content. But we really want to look at what do we want students to be able to do. So the content's great, but what do they need to be able to have that content be able to perform in ways? So are there skills that go along with that? And one of the things I'm going to have you guys do right now is we're actually going to look at what's called learning objectives. How many of you are familiar with writing or working with learning objectives? Okay, so we're going to do quick, painless, I promise, fun little activity. So the next page that we have on here is a little bit about learning objectives and the difference between those and learning outcomes. There's a link on here for 2 different examples of the Bloom's taxonomy. And when we're writing learning objectives, we really want to try and utilize some action verbs, something the students can do. So what I'm going to have you guys do, is I'm going to give you some sticky notes, nothing electronic at the moment. So as you can see across the top are the different options that we have for Bloom's taxonomy, right? The things that we want them to do as we build towards higher order thinking. There are verbs that have been categorized into those different areas that we can utilize. And of course, there's different levels of different things that we want students to do depending on the year in school, freshmen versus upperclassmen, higher level. There's also different things you can have lower level and higher level in a course together. It depends on what's important for your students. So go ahead and take a minute to take a look at these verbs. And the reason we're using verbs is because they're measurable. We have something that we can tell that our students are actually doing. Without that, if I say I want my students to understand how to analyze a case study, understand is a little vague. What am I asking them to do? So a verb kind of makes that a little more concrete. There's an action that goes with it.
She wants to write down a learning objective for our class.
Yes. 1 or 2 of them. If you want to write more, let me know. I'll give you more sticky notes.
Well, all my courses are tied to certification, so the state tells me what my objective is.
And that's very important. And those can be the vital ones that you have to have in your course, right? But there still might be ones that are important to you.
Okay.
So there might be something that you want your students to still get out of it that is inherent to your teaching. And that's okay too. So, and we're gonna talk about quality matters towards the end, and they have different ones that are course, and then you break it down into even modules. So there can be a difference. It doesn't have to be. They can just, if you want to go with the ones that are, again, certified and have to be in there, that's okay too. But we do have departments that will go ahead and allow instructors to break down and write. And that's why often you get into the smaller numbers when you're doing that. 1 to 3 is your own. I still want my students to be able to write effectively. And this is where the backward design kind of starts from. We're looking at what the outcomes need to be. Part of the next area that we're going to work into is a whole plan. So we'll let you work through that. But okay, most everybody has a learning objective. So now I'm going to hand you out. This is kind of a course blueprint. There's several different models of this that float around. This just happens to be the one that I use. Sloan C, or OLC actually it's called now, Online Learning Consortium, has a blueprint of their own that they utilize. Very similar. Okay. This blueprint is in the course in an electronic format, so if you want to continue to utilize it as you actually get into building your courses, you are welcome to do that. I just find that when I do consultations with faculty, this helps make the process a little more streamlined. Makes everything kind of fit together. One of the big things about backward design, and when we get into the quality matters, is that things are in alignment. And so this kind of helps you build that out. So what I want you to do with your sticky notes, and some of you already figured that out, is go ahead and stick the sticky notes that you had for your learning objectives into this first column. And with the backward design, they kind of break out assessments and assignments into separate things. Some people can kind of lump those together, but they're really two different options. Does anyone have any thoughts about assessments versus assignments? So,
Okay.
Diane, yes.
Thank you. So whenever we do this in course redesign, it's so tempting just to skip assessments and go to learning activities because we have to know what we're doing before we can assess it. But the beauty of the backward design process is what will it look like for your students to reach the objective? And once you know what that is, what does it look like? What can they know or do or perform? Then you can figure out what the learning activities are. But it's a little bit of a struggle point for us usually. So don't feel weird if you're a little on edge.
That's a very good point. Yes, assessments kind of seem kind of vague. It's hard to kind of nail that part down. And a lot of times what we think of as assessment is how we're assessing them throughout the course. What do we want to see that growth as, and how are we marking that? And what we want to tie to that assessment are the learning activities. So they kind of go hand in hand. If we can think about assessment first, though, the goal there, and when you watch the video, she's really good about making it clear, even much clearer than I can explain it. I love this video. And a colleague happened upon this video, and I was really excited about that. So I'm glad she shared that. So the point of the assessments is that you're making sure that the learning activities fit. So her point in there talks about being able to do a debate. We've always done a debate. We love the debate. It's an awesome project. All the kids get into it. But when we look at what we're truly trying to do, assess over the semester or the course for the students to do, does it really fit? Okay, did they get out of that debate what they needed to? Are they coming out with, is it the goal skills to be able to debate a topic or to have a deeper understanding of the topic, those kind of things. So does it fit? So we kind of want to try to think of assessments. If that's a little confusing at this point, that's okay. We don't have a lot of time to get into that, but I highly recommend reading that page that we have along with watching the video, and that will make it a little clearer. And there are some other links in there that will help as well. So if we can think about assessments, and then the next thing I want you to do is to go ahead and tie in a learning activity that would fit that objective that you just wrote. And now what I really want you to dive into is think about how that works in the online environment. So what you would normally have as an assignment, does that fit online? And do we need to take a look at how to make it fit online? So go ahead and write down along your lines, there's your learning objective, your assessment if you can think about that deeply, and then your learning assignments. And we're going to move on through that. I'm going to let you work on that for a minute. Okay, how's that going? Were you guys able to come up with a couple of different assignments that you think would work? Would anyone like to share their examples of assignments they thought might work? Come on.
If I go first, will someone else go? Because I've already talked too much. You go ahead, yes.
I have. So do you want the activity, the assessment, or the learning objective, the whole thing?
Go with the whole thing.
Go with the whole thing. Okay. So I'm coming at this with an advantage because I have a course that I've been teaching for almost 3 years, and we're looking at trying to see if we can like hybridize it or somewhat put it online. So one of their learning objectives is they have to be able to analyze apparel quality. Okay. So for the assessment, I was trying to figure out, because I know what they do, but trying to figure out how they're going to do it online is the difficult thing. Because what we do in class is kind of a different thing. So interactive skill building would probably be very effective with them on that, because there's examples that I typically do in class through slides and stuff like that we kind of go over, things to look for. And then I also have some practice quizzes that I've been developing as another type of assessment. And then their actual learning activity is an apparel analysis project. And they actually take the same category, so they'll take 2 shirts or 2 jackets, 2 pants, but they have to be in different price points. And they have to actually go through a system of analyzing everything. So they have to look at the labels, whether or not they comply. They have to assess how well it's held up. They have to assess how much they paid for it, how many times they've worn it to see what the cost per wear was. So they go through this whole analysis, and then it actually makes them look at how they make purchase decisions and whether or not that was a good purchase decision or a bad purchase decision. And so that's what we kind of go through. So I was trying to figure out how to back into seeing how that would transition. Because they love this. They love the assignment. They say they never go shopping the same again. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I'm assuming it's a good thing, but
We're going to go with the good thing. So the analysis is, when they do it in class, they talk about it, and they stand up and give like a presentation.
And they bring in the garments, and they talk about how much their cost per wear is, how they made the decision or initially, whether or not they've worn it as much as I thought they did, how it's held up, their opinion of it before they purchased it, and their opinion of it now, and then their opinion of it like after they did their analysis. Do they still feel the same way about this garment, or do they feel differently about this garment now?
Fabulous. So yeah, there's a couple different ways that you could utilize. You could make that into pieces, right? So the analysis could include a pre-survey of the materials and the pieces. Then you can have them do a written analysis that gets,
They do that.
and then that gets submitted, and they can actually still record a presentation of them talking about the different pieces and those kind of things. The nice thing about this also is if there's a discussion that happens as part of that in the class, you could have them post those to the class. You can put them up in the class. You can also post them to a discussion board, and then have a discussion board where they have to talk about each other's presentations and give feedback in that way. So it may not be synchronous happening exactly as it did in the face-to-face, but it still happens almost identical. So that's the great thing about online now. We used to beat our heads against the wall and go, how do I get my students to be able to submit a video? They used to send a DVD in, and these things that for 20 years, you have no idea how excited I am today that there are options that are at your fingertips
They
I mean-
carry it around with them everywhere.
Yes, and that's literally it. They can record this stuff on a phone, on an iPad. They don't need the big fancy equipment. If they have it, that's great. But yeah, they used to have to go out and buy a camera to participate in a class. Now it's right there. It's part of their life, and they can do this. You can record inside Canvas a little blip, and they can come. It can be a part of that. Things that you just are right there. So that's a great example. Thank you for that one.
I just want, when you were talking, I immediately started thinking about an infomercial, like their video, they could be filming an infomercial. You know, they're like a 10-minute,
Yeah.
this one compared to that.
Kai, diversity.
Yes, yeah, that's what I said.
Yes, yes. You get to have so much excitement, and they buy into this, right? I mean, this is kind of their world. They take a video, they upload it somewhere, somebody watches it, that kind of stuff. So having a project that actually allows them to incorporate what they already love to do. Well, not all of them. Now, if my son had to upload a video, he would probably rather die, but he will not be in apparel merchandising, so we're okay. But, so we do want to be careful there. So that sharing, that's a thought we have to kind of process. That is something they would normally do in class, if that's a part we want to incorporate, that's important to continue, and then just let the students know up front that that's what they're going to have to participate in, so that they're well versed in that. They get over that, so they're okay with it. Now, there is something to be said for, it does sometimes take away the fear. It's something that they're used to doing, and I don't have to stand in front of a class, and you may get more out of them than you would sometimes. So that'll be an interesting comparison as you move forward to kind of track that and kind of see how that plays out, what the difference is between what you got in a face-to-face and what you get in an online. And is it better, the same, worse, those kind of things. So, did you have a thought that you wanted to share? As I get you my
That's okay. So the first one was very similar to what you have already talked about. So my other one that I'm doing, the learning objectives, they have to advocate as a professional for public education. So getting the idea of advocating, but you're not talking to your grandma, you're now a school principal, and you need to be, so the assessment is they're writing a 2-page paper, or 2-page letter to the editor, advocating for something that's happening in the news. So my learning objectives are, the activities. Right now I have them all, I have the Miller Writing Center come to class during one of our face-to-face, and they do like a really nice 3-hour workshop with them about the idea of continuing someone else's thoughts and those kinds of things. I don't know how I would move that to online. We've experimented with having Dr. Truman has Skyped into my class before to do it whenever I'm not teaching on campus, but it's still synchronous. All their bodies are in there. I don't know. We'd have to work towards.
Right, and that's a really good thought. There are times when synchronous is an important aspect for online learning. The key for that is being flexible. I have seen it work well. Generally what you do is you have times that are available for small groups. This time is available, this time is available, this time is available. And thankfully, James is great at being flexible and wanting to do a lot of things for the students, so we're very lucky to have him on our university staff. So that's something that you can utilize, is then students can sign up for the time that's flexible for them and works with James's schedule as well.
Right.
So that's one way to work around that.
But a question that I have about, because I use like Google Hangout and different stuff like that where we can have synchronous meeting times where we're, synchronously online. If you have international students though, that's where I can't get around because they're on a 12-hour time difference. Am I going to ask them to get up at 2 in the morning to participate? Am I going to get up at 2 in the morning to, so trying to navigate that.
That is an exceptionally good point. I actually have a class where I have a student that's from Japan.
Yeah.
That's in my class with me. And we do everything asynchronously. The discussion posts happen. Now, you can have backup plans. There is a model, there are, just like when you have it in a face-to-face class, right? There are students that suffer certain issues, anxiety issues. I will use my son again because I can't. He is in a computer science program. They're supposed to do projects with a group. He went up to his instructor and said, if I work with a group, I will want to jump off a bridge. And they said, that's great, do your project on your own. That's okay. That, you know, as long as you do realize the work is more. And he's like, that's okay, I don't mind if the work is more. Good for you, son. You know, but there's students that are like that, right? So we want to incorporate backup plans for those situations because they are going to come up. There are things that are going to happen when they can't participate in a regular way in which other students do. And as long as we're prepared to deal with that, that's okay. There's often a backup plan. Okay, so you can't meet at this time. Please, you know, make sure you post your ideas and I can read them, or submit something, a video, and I will respond. That's where the voice thread, right? That would kind of work for that. It's an interactive, a little more personal model, those kind of things. Not all classes can be synchronous. We do have to keep that in mind. There are certain instances in which it works well, and certain instances in which it doesn't. Hybrid model that we had last time works really well for that because we have those meeting time on classes, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You can meet on a Wednesday at 10 o'clock. They're scheduled for that. They know that they're going to be free at that time. Fully online is not.
I know some of us in the room teach in other countries, and I wondered if they ever taught from this country to another country and what their additional strategies might be.
Depending on the difference of students. Asian students are very quiet, so it's different. We will initiate the discussions and we can lead the class, it will be different. But largely, it is a globalized world. Students are getting more and more similar. But the facilities are different.
Right.
Like in China, probably, like real-time online sessions are not possible. But in other countries, it might be possible. Depends on national conditions.
Yeah, I attended the conference that talked about the difference in having cues that are different depending on your diversity. What we assume would be natural cues aren't the same for our diversity students. And that's something to be very aware of, so thank you for pointing that out. There are things that we can't just assume and shouldn't want to. So that's a really good point. Again, we try to be, the online mode is really for flexibility. We are trying to allow students that need to learn that way, some learn better in that mode. Now, I maybe don't learn great in a face-to-face class. I need to be in front of a computer where I can manage my time and I can do that. So I learn better in that way. We also want to make sure that we're opening it up for like bottlenecks where students aren't able to get through all the classes in a timely fashion because there's too many students and we don't have enough resources to teach all of it, not enough classroom seats. You know, these are issues that are in a crunch, or trying to do the 4-year, as we try to push that as a initiative across the campus. Online can alleviate some of that. So we want to do this to the best of our ability and still be flexible, but we don't want to leave students out on the other end just kind of floating. So we want to make sure that it's a community and we're building that. Are there any other thoughts for anyone that wants to share? Assignments, thoughts, learning objectives?
Yeah, very quick one. The objective is to the students be able to build recirculating system for fish, which is small scale, can fit like backyard to produce their own fish. So the assessment for online class or assignment can be like, I can cut this recirculating system into pieces and they interactively can arrange those pieces into the system. And I can do that like the pre-test before I discuss the issue and see what is the difference between their arrangement before and after teaching them how is the correct way to arrange it.
That's fabulous. Simulation is definitely, and being able to work through with pieces is a great tool for online that we don't necessarily get to utilize in a face-to-face. So there are benefits to teaching online because we can't assume that a face-to-face student's going to be able to have access to that all the time, right? So when we know they're online and there's, you know, like my daughter has gone in and done shopping as part of a Penguin shopping mall when she was younger and learned all about shopping. Much sooner than I was like, really? But there, there's so many things that we get to, go work and, go shop and go be a retail salesperson and have to do that. And they get access to these simulations that we wouldn't otherwise have if we weren't in the online world. And those are some of the amazing perks. So there's always a give and take in everything we do, right? So that's a really good point. Thank you for that one. Welcome. Other thoughts?
I'll offer one out, teaching the third incarnation of an Intro to American Government class online. And so one of the objectives, obviously, is for the students to be able to think critically and analyze data or analyze ideas to form their own opinions. And an assessment that's been done the past 2 semesters, there's a video online that basically describes the Electoral College and electing the president with a prompt of, is this fair? Should it be done this way? And they respond, and then students are required to respond to 2 other students' posts. So you get a discussion going and get different ideas flowing. So they're analyzing others' works and forming their own opinions and thoughts.
Fabulous. And that's been working well?
So for the first 2 semesters, the other professors have told that it has.
Very good. Very good. And that's a great segue into, thank you for that. There are different types of assignments that we can do online. We've talked a little bit about them here in these groups. The next thing we want to talk about is when we're giving an assignment out, when we're doing it online, we aren't able to address every single question in front of their face that they would normally have. So one of the great things to do in an online class is to make sure we're building rubrics, especially for major assignments. We can do it for all assignments, but if you have a project or a video presentation or a discussion post, a paper, whatever it is, you want to build a rubric that actually makes sense to your students so that they can refer to that as they're working on their project. Because again, a lot of students are working 2 a.m. in the morning, right? We aren't going to answer an email at 2 a.m. Well, I'm not going to answer an email at 2 a.m. Somebody might. But so we want to make sure they have access to what they need when they need it in a way that makes sense. So if we spell it out and in detail exactly what it is we're asking them to do, how to do it, and to do it successfully, then they have a marker. And there are different rubrics that are already out there on the internet that you can work with. If you Google search, there's some resources at the end of the class that I have. It's called Merlot, and there's some of those that actually provide some of these tools and those kind of things. So you don't have to create your own if you don't want to. You can reinvent one that's already there that has some really good examples. If you want to build your own, that's great too. But definitely have something there for your students to go by from the very first day, so they know what they're getting into and they know what their projects are going to entail. Because again, online usually involves a lot of time management. Students need to be able to kind of calculate how it is that they're working through their class. So we want to make sure we do that. Next thing we do is when we have the rubric, that's great, they did the project, they handed it in, we're now going to grade it, but we want to make sure we don't just highlight, okay, this is what you did on the rubric and this is your grade. Because that's, okay, great, but I don't know what I did to meet that exactly. So we want to make sure we're giving them feedback that actually is in depth and means something to them when we give the grade back. So that they can, especially if it's something they're going to do as they work through a program, or if there's going to be more papers throughout the course, then they know what it is that they're aiming for each and every time they do that project. So. Okay, so I know there's going to be a thought. And there's an article here about how to prevent cheating. How many of you plan to do quizzes, tests online? And what are your current thoughts about quizzing and testing online? Who would like to share what theirs?
The past 2 professors have told us to use the Respondus lockdown browser for when they're taking their tests or their quizzes to prevent use of external websites, at least on the device they're using. Which we know there's a way around that using other devices, but in theory, if they only have one device.
In theory, and I thank you for that, because I tell you, I said I've been helping teach online for 20 years. Most amazing thing that ever came on the market when it first came out was this Respondus lockdown browser. Oh, we all jumped for joy because they couldn't access any other websites. All of a sudden came along smartphones. And we're all like, well, everybody respond to this lockdown browser.
I already tell them you can Google it and use everything that you want. But I think that my challenge is that they make things together instead of doing individually. So it's the big, but I already said you can Google everything. I don't have a textbook anywhere. Anytime you forget any formula, just Google it. But my challenge is how they do it individually.
Individually. So yes, those are, anyone else have other thoughts and concerns? So we have we tried lockdown browsers, so we can't access it. We allow them to access it, but we want them to do it individually. Those are thoughts. You teach
Mine's all project-based.
project-based. So there's the 3 different entities, right? And those are different schools of thoughts. And there is no school of thought that is exactly right or wrong. It's whatever fits best in your scenario. So you have to decide what's important to you. Such as these formulas are out there. And you can go out and get them, and we work in a world in which that we have access to that materials, thankfully. And we can pull this stuff down and we want to work through it. A lot of people have open book tests. Again, it depends on, a lot of times, what you're covering. I know that if you're in nursing, you're going to have to go take a board exam, and there is not going to be any access to any information, and you're going to need to know it to pass it. So having a proctored test at that point throughout their courses is probably pretty good prep work. They're going to need that kind of scenario. Now, if I'm teaching a religion class, and it's not going to have an impact on their future, being able to get a job, do I mind whether they can go out and look up the material and answer the questions and put forth some information onto a quiz or test? That's something I get to determine. There are different ways to think about this as well. You can have things such as timed questions. So they only get so much time. So maybe they can still go look it up, but they at least have to have an idea of where to find it. They've accessed the materials, they know the content in general, they know where it's at in the book because they've read it. It's all there, they just need a quick marker. And if they don't have that, they'll know the first time they take that quiz. I've seen it.
And can't you randomize your questions too, so that they can't sit next to each other and be like, yes, 1 and 1? You know, if you have them randomized, then everyone will see eventually the same questions, but they can't sit in a group and
Never. That's a great example. Large test banks with lots of questions. As many, and you can build some, you can get them from publishers. If you're using a textbook, you can put them all together.
There's a bunch of friends. One of them is the brightest one. He or she would sit with the others and solve their problems. So even if it's randomized, you are not sure if their own thought process.
To some extent, but again, if they're timed, there's not enough time to answer everybody's questions. So there are ways to try to at least steer away from the ability to cheat. Now, again, having worked in online for a long time, most of the time, the lower the stakes for the courses, the less cheating there's going to be. If it's a course I'm taking, or have to take a core course, program course, those kind of things, the more likely they are there to learn it, get through it, and I'm just going to get a grade and move on. The higher the stakes for whether they're getting into a program, whether it's going to make or break their career, those kind of things, that's when the higher levels of cheating come in. So we have to be a little more careful. There are options for that. There's proctoring. We have testing centers here. There are testing centers where you can have a proctored across the United States and other places. There are militaries that they have individuals in courses, and they'll have, like a sergeant or somebody that will proctor an exam. It totally depends on your teaching philosophy, your department's requirements, and those kind of things. So those are things you need to make sure you're aware of as you move into the online, because there's lots of different schools of thought. Again, is it open or is it more essay? Do I get to know my students as they go through the course, and I know when suddenly an answer does not sound like the student, and they've probably had somebody help them answer this question? Or do I don't mind if they work in a group, because guess what? They're still interacting with the content, and hey, I got them to work together on this project, and they didn't even know that I got them to work together on this project. So, so those are your schools of thought. And so there's options: randomizing questions, randomizing answers within a question, timing, we're not releasing, changing them up every year, changing passwords if you want to require them to get into passwords. There's lots of different options to secure if we need to. So, you had thoughts?
So for online class, which is better, to have the test at certain time or to be flexible? Like at 2 p.m. you will have exam, or whenever you are ready, go and take your exam.
Thank you, that's great. The more flexible you can be for your students, the better. Now that doesn't mean it's a correspondence and they are free to take the test whenever they want throughout the entire semester. You can move them along in a schedule, but a lot of times common practice is if I have a quiz or a test this week, I open it on Sunday, I close it on Saturday. And students have time to get in there anytime during that week to go in and take that test. Because again, they might be working or have kids and have activities at night, and they're not going to take the test until Wednesday night when they're finally free. So but then they move together as a group still, and they're staying this semester just like you would in your face-to-face class, but you have that. And that's where that timing comes in too. So if you normally would do a 90-minute test, you still have a 90-minute test. So they sign in on Wednesday, they get 90 minutes to take that test, 90 minutes is up, they're done, it's submitted, they have their one chance, that they're done for the week. So that's how you kind of work through that.
In this case, students can help each other, because I can take my test and then take other students' tests and help them.
You can.
Do the whole class if they want.
Again, that's where the randomizing and the large test bank questions help with that. It doesn't happen a lot, again, in doing 20 years. Most of the time, students are really there for their self-learning, especially when you get online. That's a different type of student. It can happen, but it's not a high priority for them to do that. They're more likely to look it up than to have a student who's going to take a test and share that. Now, if it's the same test semester after semester after semester after semester, that becomes more problematic. So it is nice to change up questions. So it's something to be aware of and be careful of. And again, also asking higher order thinking questions and not just random knowledge questions also helps with that. So things that they have to actually work through and process and can't just get out of a book isn't going to be, because everyone's going to think a little bit different too, right? So you can always have an essay question at the end too that helps them, that shows that student did that work, that you realize that that's who that is, and there is no one right answer. You have to grade those yourself, so it depends on the number of students in your class, right? It is a concern. Oh no, it is a concern, but I wouldn't let it deter you from utilizing that scenario, and keep an eye on it.
So the rule of thumb that you're kind of saying for a full semester is about a week for something being up potentially. Well, I ask because I'm teaching in a 5-week summer course.
Right, you're gonna have a crunch.
So yeah,
You might have 2 days.
2 days, yeah. Is that necessarily fair to this? I know that's. I don't know if there's any standard or potential research or rule of thumb.
There's not for that, because again, you're crunching, right?
Yeah.
They've signed up for what would be a semester in a 5-week course. So you've signed up for some intense, and that's part of that intense. And that's something, let them know up front, because then they can opt out. Within that, they can say, all right, this isn't for me. Especially in the summer in an online first time, I've seen it. And both the students and the faculty have come out crying, I will tell you, anyone who has struggled through that first year has gone on to teach fabulous online classes summer after summer after summer. So it's just as they come in and as they're getting used to being students online, because the old model was correspondence, right? They get to watch some stuff, they get to answer it whenever they're free to do that, and I'm just going to breeze my way through this because online is easy. Wait. Online is just as important and intense as any other class that we teach, sometimes more, because we can engage them. So we do have to be careful on that line that we're not overwhelming them. Don't overwhelm. We get really excited, right? I can give them everything. I can give it to them now. I'm so excited. Oh wait, I just did like a 8,000 level graduate course for a sophomore in college. I better dial that back a little bit. but, because we love what we do. So those are good points, right? So things, again, to be aware of, think about, we're not gonna pretend they don't happen, we're gonna be careful and think about ways to kind of circumvent that to the best of our abilities and determine what's important for ourselves and talk about it with our departments and know what they think and want.
And some of the courses that I took, like as an undergrad, because I did a lot of online, especially the crunch classes, they would always make us have a syllabus quiz. And as ridiculous as it is, but those key points would be in there, so there was like no getting around it. You had to have read it and you had to have taken the quiz, and the important key things were there, so at least it helps reinforce that they realize that my tests are only going to be open for 2 days, and maybe it'll stick in their head. Maybe. Hopefully.
That's very good. It is. So the next section I was going to run through was going to be about actually designing your course. I'm just going to touch base on it real quick, and for those of you that are going to be designing, you are welcome to come in and sit down with me personally. I do consultations on how to design your courses. There's a couple different links in here. Designing a course online is the one I'm going to pull up right now. And this is just a couple of tips about designing different things you want to consider. There is also in here that I want to make sure you can take note of is I actually have a PowerPoint that I created that actually has some of the different key points of designing and teaching online that is, I think it's 6 minutes, that you're welcome to look through also. But like I said, come make an appointment with me. We'll sit down and talk about the planning, and we can go through this part and looking at what it means to build out. Because we want to think about, some people do by week, some people do by topic, some people do by, I have 4 tests, and so everything's going to be geared towards those 4 tests. It depends on how you need to structure your course, and there is no one right way to do that, so we want to make sure you're fitting that model into what you're doing. But as you can see, mine is built out in modules, and that's generally what we want to have happen, is we want to make sure that everything's laid out in a manner in which students need to be able to get through and understand that that's the process that they're following through. And so we can sit down and work through that a little bit. The next thing I'm going to hand out is we have a subscription here at the university that's called Quality Matters. And this is a rubric that I am very fond of. And I'll just let you guys pass those back on around. What this is in getting ready to build your courses or while you're teaching your courses, this is a really good marker for being able to include what's important. The key for this is it's a national standard. Maryland Online designed this through a grant many years ago. I would say about 10, I believe. And we happened upon this as a group that was being questioned at a different university for accrediting online courses as part of a land-grant university. And so we had to find a tool that made sure that they were quality courses. So I've been using this for a really long time, and so now we're allowed to share this information here because we have a subscription. So the keys to this is that it's not just me standing up here telling you what I think is important, because this is everybody nationally and internationally also thinks that these things are important and find that this helps student success. Well, that's the key in the end, right? We want to make sure our students are successful in their online environments. Now, I'm going to point out just a couple of things on this real quick. There's point values into these areas. The point values are according to what's important. A 3 is vitally important. You want to try and make sure to include that in your course. The 2s help make the course better. 1s are something to think about and consider if you can. Their goal is that you pass with 86 and above, I believe it is, as points that you can just kind of tally up yourself as you go. Now, as I do course approvals, as new courses come on, I actually use this as a marker for information that I need to see in a course. I also use this if I'm reviewing a course. So you can, once you have an online course, you can ask me to come in midway through and do a review of what your course is and how it looks and what's working or what you might be missing. And I just go through this and look through it and see the different things and offer suggestions because, again, I've been seeing courses for 20 years. So, that's just a good marker. Those are really good information. I'm gonna let you take that with you, and you can have that as you build. And there's actually even examples in the annotations of things that you can do to fulfill those that they have as good ideas, which are fabulous. So I'm a huge fan. You can also sign up online to become part of their little group. If anyone wants that, we'll make sure that we send out that information. Marissa will remind me to make sure we send that out in a link afterwards so that you can sign up to be a part of the community, because we get that as a perk for being subscribers. Okay. Now, what I want to touch on real quick is part of the actual teaching, right? We get ready, we put the courses online, we've got all this wonderful content. That's the next piece, right? We did the assessments, we did the assignments, we have content. We talked about that a little bit in the last session, such as videos, the different types of assignments that we can do. We talked about the different software, so you can look back on some of those in the hybrid. So we've incorporated that. We put out our content. We have PDFs. They're accessible through the Office of Accessibility. We've done all that, and that's part of that. So you can determine that next. If you go back and want to take a look at that, that's your next plan. Is what content do you need for them to be able to do that assignment successfully? So now what we're actually teaching, right? We're in the class, we're spending our semester teaching. There are some things that you want to make sure that you're doing. And so we're just going to make sure that we welcome the students as they come in. This is online. They don't have a face. They don't feel necessarily, again, they have that correspondence idea maybe in their head. We want to make sure that they know that there is a teacher on the other end of that. Welcome, thank you for joining the class. This is what it's going to look like. One of the great ways to do that is to record a little video of how the class works, because everyone teaches differently. I may utilize discussion, I may not. I may have projects listed over here, or I may have them listed under assignments, or I may have them listed under both. So however you're utilizing your course, take a little screenshot video, walk them through the course, say this is how you're going to manage your course this way, and they can navigate the minute they're in, and they're not floundering around feeling frustrated and scared because they can't find out where they're supposed to be. So that's one great way to welcome them. Again, we talked about being specific. Communicate with your students throughout the course. We have an ability to make announcements in Canvas, and students can get that sent to their phone, and you can get updates. Let them know that you're there and you care. Hey, due date for this project is coming up. Are you on target? Things that we can do to make sure that they know that we still care. We're not just off. I had a faculty member when I was taking a class, she was in a car accident, and she still recorded her voice so that she knew that even though she wasn't physically unable to type, was still teaching the class. I was like, that's impressive. That's truly impressive. I don't know that I could do that, but and still she was giving verbal feedback to our staff. That was a good teacher, instructor, professor. So, and then give specific, actionable, and kind feedback in a timely manner. We're asking them to submit assignments on time. We want to make sure that we're giving them feedback on time. And the last one I'm going to make note of on here is just make sure that you're patient and flexible with your students and with yourself, because it's going to be a process for you just as it is for them. Okay, but you can read all of that after, since it's all online. Again, there's the other information. Do you have questions for me?
I do. And I've talked to you about this before. I teach my classes in a hybrid, so most of my classes online already. And so I'm struggling I feel like I really have much better personal relationships with the students. So between myself as the instructor and them, they talk to me, I talk to them, that's good. But I'm having trouble bridging them talking to each other, kind of like that classroom community, face-to-face, conversation and community that they create amongst themselves. I'm struggling with creating that online without me directly facilitating it all the time.
I was going to say, in a hybrid, they may not do that because they're already talking face-to-face.
Right, well, I'm just thinking about in the
So
online.
it probably will change a little bit once you move fully online.
Okay.
Because they don't have that interaction with that face-to-face. Quite often, it moves into that naturally.
Okay.
Because they do want to connect with another student, And so it will happen, but if they're already doing it in the face-to-face, they don't necessarily feel the need to do it online. I have had classes throughout my program, and it's not a fully online program, but a lot of classes were online, right? Where you end up moving through certain classes as some type of a cohort. And so you eventually just have conversations on there because that's where you see them and meet them, and that's where you're having that time with them. And if they move into that mode, they're going to continue to have those conversations. It will happen. One of the things you can do for that once you move fully online is you're having discussion posts, but you can also have like an open, like a cafe discussion post that allow them to converse back and forth about different topics on their own. That is freedom for them to be able to communicate with each other, and it's not about what did you read or the video that you watched or those kind of things. And that sometimes sparks that a little bit, or you can say, if anyone's having difficulty with this project, here's your space to talk about it. And then they may do that. We had a math instructor that did this, and she found that the students actually answered each other's questions about homework assignments, and she ended up not having to do it very often. She was like, why did I not do this sooner? Don't know what. But we don't know that that's going to happen, right? So they will kind of lend themselves to that. And that's that's another thing as you work through this process, keep a journal. You can do it right down the side. If you want to do it on here, you can make another little marker of things that work well, things that don't work well, things that, you're kind of sort of maybe want to tweak but try again. That way you have an idea of how that semester went, because it's hard to keep track of. It moves fast. We have other things going on. We haven't taught online before. We think it worked. And then survey the students. Find out from them what worked well for them, what didn't work well for them, what their thoughts are. We have a big mid that we can send out as an electronic version. I have a regular survey that we can send out that we can copy for you guys, or you can just make your own. Just post a discussion. What's working well, what's not working well. So that you get feedback from your students that lets you know. That's very important as well. Very good point, thank you. Okay, we're at the end, but does anyone else have any other questions?
Are you available to audit the online classes during the summer, as you mentioned? Will you come in with this?
Absolutely, I'm here year-round.
As soon as I just want to make sure.
Thank you for asking that. Yes, I'm here year-round, and I would love to audit courses. I love online. There's so many fabulous things that we can do that reach students in amazing ways that just allow us to do things that we couldn't otherwise do. It can be an engaging, amazing space if we make it that way. So we just have to put a little thought process into it. It does take work, upfront work. It's heavy lifting at the beginning. I'm not gonna lie to you about that. But once it's done, it's just like getting all that work prepared, right? We put all this stuff together, we have all these lecture materials, we've got all this stuff, we've outlined what we're gonna say for this semester, we go in. It's a lot of work up front to do a lecture. This is the same thing. So once you're ready, you have all that together, next semester you tweak, and then once it's built, you go teach. So don't let that scare you off. There is a survey at the very bottom on there that says online session survey. I will ask that you go and fill that out. If you can do it now before you leave, that's great. If not, I ran out of time, I understand. It'll be there so you can answer.